You're live. Okay. I had to change my shirt there. It was a bit warm. This way. Sorry. Words. Okay. This video I was going to do last week when it was fresh in my head. And then I decided to do the dialogue one and the screenwriting one first because I thought they were a little more essential topics. And give people a chance to watch them over the weekend, which nobody did. So I don't worry about the algorithm now. It's been too many days. I might as well just do this while I can still kind of remember what I was talking about, hopefully. Even though, as I said in the description, I don't think this subject is as important to aspiring, especially first-time writers, novels, literature, or screenplays even. I include this type of thing in my screenwriting playlist, even though it's not screenwriting specific. Most of the guidelines or principles still apply. And of course, we don't use the word rules very often, right? So anyway, this was in 2 parts. So for part 1, well, it wasn't in 2, it's covering 2 videos, so it will be 2 parts in this video. And in some places, I likely, like I said, will have forgotten what they were saying, and we'll try to figure it out. Okay. So I don't know if these should be in that order or this order. The video that came first is not necessarily the video I talk about first. Yeah. I think we'll go down. Sorry, I'm just scrolling real quick. Neither of these is supposed to be very long. I'm just trying to figure out which order is better for you, the viewer. So sorry, this is wasting a minute, but not Okay, so let's do this one first. The bad intro can undermine characters video. Character introductions left out of dialogue video mostly. Characters whom deserve a long description and such at the outset. In one of the videos talked already about introducing a bunch at once and have no ideal solutions. I guess that was recently when I did a video about good and bad strategies for that. So he was kind of restating some information that he had already conveyed in a previous video, I think. And so I was saying here that I already covered that in another video, I think, so we can skip this next minute too. So as a joke, I said, I find it best, well, I shouldn't tell you it's a joke because then it won't be funny, right? I find it best when characters don't meet each other at all. Then we have less trouble worrying about their pesky names or whether they end up sword fighting about something and such. Ha ha ha. Okay. But okay, here's some actual yeah, I'm less concerned here with the actual bad intros undermining the characters, even though it says so in the thumbnail, than my own personal jokes. The audience named Jaws after the fact, though, right? Hooper says squalus as some name at one point, but this is not the correct genus for great white nor tiger shark, apparently. So those would be... Squalus is a genus of dogfish now. It used to refer to all sharks, and I don't know if that was before or after the movie came out, and I'm pretty sure it was probably before. But a dogfish would be a much smaller size of jaws overall than either of these 2 ocean giants. So Merriam-Webster or whatever says genus of sharks originally comprising all the known sharks, but now restricted to various typical dogfishes. When the change, before or after film, don't know. Hooper would have known this, but director wanted to make it. Director wanted to make him sound smart and scientific. I'd have to review the clip, but largely irrelevant, except that nobody in the film calls the shark Jaws at all. So that I don't know that undermined the character, though, that the character was never actually given a name other than that bite ratio is correct and that kind of thing. Those proportions are correct. Oh, you'd like to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name in the National Geographic. Okay. Characterization info, again, backstory, attributes, likes, dislikes. This is stuff that should be part of your intro to be useful, but the danger is running into the info dump issue again, which we've covered that in like 2 or 3 videos now. Show their actions in introductory scene and spread the rest out. Film. This was my point. Film has visual. I think this was my point. Film has visual cues. Maybe it was his. Film has visual cues that books can't convey without words, though. Right. If you cast a specific actor because he looks a specific way, or you give him specific makeup, you'll know some things about this character before he even speaks. So a screenplay can have a small info dump in the little header that is conveyed to the director and actors, but is not automatically given to the viewers. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. I know this is all jumbled. Like I said, I should have done this last week when it was fresh in my head, and I wouldn't have just been reading words and trying to remember what they went to. Okay, so in a screenplay, for those of you who are doing screenwriting instead of prose fiction, every screenplay, or enough of them that every is applicable, will have something like this, but it will be, you know, interior or exterior, and then it'll not necessarily have a number, but it will usually say something like day. So mini mall, day. You know you're shooting outdoors instead of indoors. And then below that, there'll be a little blob of action to tell you kind of what's going on before the scene kind of begins, or if it's a jump cut, then the main action might already be kind of going on, depending. But then below that, when a character is introduced, it'll be something like that, but with a name, Joe Smith. Then a number, 35, his age, or his approximate age. And then it'll tell us, usually when they're first introduced, how Joe Smith is dressed, you know, a little bit about his life, but not too much. Again, we're not writing a novel here, we're writing a screenplay. But based on that very first impression of Joe, we have to be able to present Joe to the audience without any necessarily voiceover words or other kind of words. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of words on the bottom or something, you know, usually for humor, Joe, single dad, whatever, like, you know, that might be. You can do that in a screenplay. A book, it's a little bit different, but kind of along the same lines. You want them to have enough information that you know who they are and why we should care about them coming into the story right now. But other than that, it doesn't have to be a big, long thing. And so that's where the big, long thing can undermine your character, right? Okay. So, again, in a screenplay, the audience doesn't get a copy of the screenplay when they walk into the theater, so they can peruse the first few pages and then take it home with them and review it and see where it matched up and where it, like, that doesn't happen. I don't know why that doesn't happen. Maybe that should happen, especially with rising ticket prices these days. Maybe I should get a commemorative book or something. But the opposite will likely happen because the movies need to cut corners somewhere to make a profit these days when they overdo their budgets and all that. Anyway, side issue. Dealt with that in the last video anyway, if you're interested in that topic. Literally, I think it was the last video of the screenplay stuff about production costs and that kind of thing. Okay. Show their actions in introductory scene and spread the rest out. Yes, we read this. Okay. So not automatically known to the viewers. Reputation conveyed through reaction of other characters is if not going to be the scene where they do the stuff that they may be known for doing or come to be known for in some other version that he doesn't list. His strategies instead of exposition dump. So like, yeah, when the guy rides into town on his horse and everybody's like, oh, you can tell they at least believe he's a fearsome gunfighter or whatever, or a renowned samurai or something. When you're the new kid at school, you don't necessarily get that. Kind of depends on what you're wearing the first day. Might not be your personality at all. Might be a smoke screen, that kind of thing. But anyway, these kind of things are not always revealed all at once on that first page. Stressed point again. Okay. So yeah, like I said, I feel like I kind of talked about this and I was kind of trying to get to the funny bits. Just to mildly disagree that, again, you don't always have to follow the rule exactly. If you have some other way of going about it, it's fine if you can justify it, okay? And then in the newer video, he said novels are not just a collection of beat points, which is exactly what we're discussing here. You know, character, as I talked about in the other video, character beats and story beats might not be the exact same beats, but if all you have feels like beats, then it's going to feel formulaic and dull for the reader. I agree. But those are the things that you usually build your structure on. So if you don't have any, it's going to be mush or pointless anecdotes or something. No stakes, no conflict, no nothing. So then there won't be any reason for the reader to get curious and want to read it. Okay, so things writers don't want to hear. Let's see, my main comment about trying to make something everyone will enjoy and fail, which of course is what we're just talking about now in a roundabout way. He said that if you try to make a pizza that even people who don't like pizza will love, then the people who do like pizza probably won't like it. And I said, well, I don't know. If you can make pizza for people that, you know, who don't like pizza and they will love it more than regular pizza, I would argue that it's likely that that's some truly amazing pizza that I might actually like to try. Like when the Lakers were doing their three-peat victory seasons, and I'm watching anyway, even though most years I find basketball pretty dull. Like, oh, all of a sudden the basketball's interesting. Okay, that didn't happen 2 years ago. That's only happening now. I don't know. Depends. So like I said, I like to play the contrarian, this is just about me being the contrarian and not doing a very great job of it so far, but you get the point. Okay, as more people like your work, more people will likely dislike the work. That's the next point. This might rebuttal. I would depend then largely upon why they don't like my work, even if it's only one person. Oh, you know what? I totally messed up. I should have showed this sooner. So for those of you who are tuning in and only want to see part 2, you still have to back it up at least a minute or something, however long I was talking before I got to the actual part 2. Whatever. So you can dislike this video for more reasons than one, that it's disorganized. Okay. Even if it's only one person and not even some subculture devoted to my eradication or whatever. Here we have substance versus theme versus execution. Those are 3 different things, any of which can fail for any subjective reason other than objective reasons. Other issue largely irrelevant to actual work might be the reason they don't like me, such as politics or my haircut or whatever. And of course, I'm not considering this video my work in terms of artistic merit, like a novel or even a screenplay. But good enough example, you might tune into this blowhard. Well, okay, in which case you're less likely to want to read my book if you knew it was me who wrote it. But they might read the book and go, hey, this guy's actually a good writer. That's the same guy, so you can't win. But my point was that, I think his point was that, you better be ready for criticism because it's going to come no matter what. And my point was that, okay, fine, but I'm going to filter that criticism. If all they can talk about is my hair or my hat or the shirt or something, then probably they didn't have any legitimate complaints about the book. And therefore, who cares? They're the bigger blowhard than I am. Whereas if they have all these things to say about the book and I seem to think that they have some actual real points, then I might go, oh, I better write a better book next time, right? Okay. But then, of course, you also have a famous, long, and never-ending story of, you know, writers who don't get along with critics and that kind of thing, like Hemingway or whoever. And they just say, well, I sold 30 million copies of them, so whatever, shove it up your rear, right? And so in the next video, when he talked about the thing that I just said about the collection of beat points or whatever, he talked about the 50 Shades of Grey, and I would argue that apart from Execution, because I've not read 50 Shades of Grey, I hear a lot of people who don't like 50 Shades of Grey because of the subject matter, but I also hear in an Execution standpoint that 50 Shades of Grey climaxes kind of too soon and puts the important conflict way too early, and then the rest is anticlimactic and mostly pointless. So there's that. But I know from watching all 3 of the movies and 2 of them recently, each sequel is like twice as bad as the previous one. And I think I talked about this in another video already too. So if you're going to make a bad sequel to a bad movie, try not to make it even worse than that. Okay. I'm not sure more people have to like the work for people to dislike someone's work either. The cult classic may be built somewhat on this reverse popularity premise. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff my friends would watch that I thought was absolute garbage and didn't understand why they were wasting their time. Like, I don't know, cannibalistic demons and clowns from space and whatnot. But caveat also to both of these 2 premises or 3, people have to have heard of it for starters. So yes, if only one person has read my work and they didn't like it, that's not a very good sample size for any statistics. Because if the book is not published and I'm only giving it to beta readers, that's a totally different discussion than, you know, the larger umbrella. But of course, in the scope of these videos, we are typically talking about what to make palatable to the beta readers, because we are using them as a sample size of the larger demographic of people who write these kind of genre books that they enjoy reading and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So yes, I have ideas that follow similar logic or story arcs. So in that regard, I don't want to just write basically the same one over and over again, you know, again, with the beat points and even maybe some of the corresponding character beats or arcs. Even if the settings and the characters are different enough and doing a different job than the crowd in the last one, etc. Like in one book, maybe it's about a group of characters in a band and they all kind of behave in a certain way. And then in a different one, I have a, you know, smaller or bigger group of characters who aren't necessarily in a band, but the book itself is kind of a similar story with a love triangle or whatever. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I wrote the same book twice. Sometimes I might do that on purpose because it saves time. Like, well, people who are into this kind of thing will read this one and they won't read this one, so they won't know that I wrote the same book twice. So depends, or movie. So it depends on how quickly you want to get it out and how much you're worried about. But then on the other hand, Hollywood likes to put out, and I've talked about this in a previous video, likes to put out movies that are very similar, because there was the Nicholas Sparks one called Message in a Bottle that's very, very similar to Sleepless in Seattle. And more people have heard of Sleepless in Seattle, but personally, I think Message in a Bottle is actually the better of the 2 films that you probably haven't seen. So there you go. And they did that to compete with each other. And obviously Sleepless in Seattle, I think, came out first and won, but don't quote me on that. Because like I said, definitely less people are talking about Message in a Bottle, even though Message in a Bottle has Paul Newman and Kevin Costner. And I like that movie better, just because. Okay, so yeah, they're different people doing different things slightly, but we're still stealing from ourselves often as writers. because that's our methodology or whatever. And so sometimes I want to change up my methodology and sometimes I don't. Okay. So lots of ideas, but trying to come up with more creative ways to tell the story perhaps is kind of more my bane as I, get older and get tired of reading the same thing over and over that I've already written, I guess. So related. So these were some comments. Paul said, another video that I like, even while I disagree with a lot of your points. Ideas. So is this? Oh, so okay. He's got a long response here and I did a response. Okay. Like you, I have more ideas than I know I will ever have time to have time to write. I think we understand what he was trying to say there. I'm not going to reread the sentence correctly. Okay. But I have more ideas than I know I will ever write. I think he meant to put like a comma or something there and then, or a semicolon, have time to write. I have more ideas for just my current book series than I'll probably get to complete in my lifetime. So he's just restating what he already said in more words. And I have detailed notes and plans for several other series as well. That should be series. Great. However, I really disagree with your statement that ideas are unimportant and it's all about the execution. That's feel-good convention wisdom in writing advice. To the contrary, I believe many books fail because the basic pitch, the idea in a log lines sentence or two, is just boring. It's been done to death. It was never worth doing even once. Too often when new writers tell me what they're working on, I have to try to figure out a nice way to ask, do you really think a lot of people want to read that? It doesn't matter how amazing the execution is, how wonderful the prose, how compelling the narrative, if the basic idea never attracts anybody to crack open the cover. Okay. And so, like I said, that was kind of long, but again, or should I have made that part 3? It's almost part 3, right? Again, that's after you're published. So I don't know how many of these book series he's actually published, probably none. I would worry about getting the first book published first before trying to write a whole series. But if you are doing a series, you have to have an overarching arc. This was discussed in the previous video. But each book should still be standalone enough that if your series gets canceled before you finish your big old arc, at least people will have a few books that they can read and enjoy and wish that they had more. Okay. This is where leave them wanting more isn't your primary goal, though, because you want it to be a satisfactory ending if you're going to write 6 or 10 or 12 books, one would assume. Okay, so my response, though, putting all that aside, even though that's part of my new response, I just thought of off the top of my head, I don't like one-size-fits-all statements either. But herein, I think the distinction can be something along the lines of genres. Terror movies are still mostly a guy chasing around some teenagers. Rom-coms are still mostly just boy meets girl. So the twist on the thing is partly idea, but partly execution, but also leads a mundane idea into a chance for a better execution that hopefully stands out above these other similar works that already came out, right? Like Message in a Bottle versus Sleepless in Seattle, or Halloween versus Jason, or whatever, or Jason versus... Sorry, Jason is Halloween, Friday the 13th. I forget. It doesn't matter. They're both boring to me. Freddy Krueger was still the better movie, right? Okay. The first or second one, anyway. So if those books fail because of the pitch, it is because it's a great idea, but they didn't know how to sell it, or because it was just poorly executed after all, and possibly had a bad title to boot. Which is to say, you haven't convinced them at all. This person, Joe, was it Joe? Paul, sorry. Paul has not convinced, I'm assuming he has students, and that's why he's getting to read all this stuff. So he has not convinced these brilliant students to self-publish, and then giving us a listing or a bunch of listings for super hot recos on Amazon. Stuff that's only available on Amazon, the titles that we're just missing out on all this amazing student, brilliant work, or whatever. So my suggestion to him was to get them to ghostwrite his series then too, and that would save him some time. He could pay them a little up front or offer them some points on the back end if it actually sells, I guess. Yeah. You never know. Because I would say that a lot of teachers do this, and I had talked about this in one of my other videos about having to pitch the story to the class after we worked on the story. And that had kind of been a disaster for a number of reasons, because we weren't then reading the ones that we might have thought we wanted to read based on their pitch or whatever. We were just told to kind of quasi-grade them based on their pitch, which I thought was, I mean, yeah, part of it was supposed to be like having the self-confidence to be able to go to Hollywood and know that your product is good or whatever, but we weren't exactly a public speaking class either. So like, it wasn't like we were working on pitching throughout the entire class and then culminated in a final pitch where we had already practiced how to give pitches before. It was, oh, you wrote a screenplay, great, now figure out how to pitch the thing. And it was like, huh? Okay, so I think some people were more nervous than others and all that kind of thing. But that's kind of a side topic that you won't have to deal with in the same way when publishing. But of course, in publishing, it's the all-important query letter and getting the agent first, and then the agent does the pitching for you, theoretically, or supposed to. And that's why you're paying them, so that you don't have to go to the publisher and fumble around and be wrong about things and not tell them what they want to hear. But then you do still have to deal with the editor, but that's dealing more concerned with the writing process, which is kind of similar to dealing with your creative writing teacher like this guy, which again, I talked about this all in the last video. So I'll go overboard with it here, and this was already way longer than I thought it would be. I thought this would be a short, fun video, but I did include a couple things that I thought were relatively useful nuggets and not a total waste of your time and mine, I hope, and blah, blah, blah. And again, if you didn't want to watch this whole thing, you didn't have to, because you could have been watching one of those other videos. Anyway, okay, so that's about it. And it's already warming up in here, and it's going to be even hotter tomorrow, so I don't know when the next video will be, but I do have a couple lined up for soon, not on this topic. Stay tuned. Oh, and as always, if you have any questions, please, please, please put them in the comments where we can make this into an actual discussion instead of just me talking for no reason.